Respected viewers, dear family of dreamers, there are moments in time when a small piece of land, surrounded by uncertainty, rises beyond imagination, and the world looks at it and asks, how? How does something so limited become so abundant? How does a place with no obvious wealth build an empire of ideas, of innovation, of power? And then a deeper question quietly whispers into our own lives. If wealth can grow there, against all odds, then what is stopping it from growing within us? Is it resources? Or is it something far more silent, far more dangerous, a mindset? Beloved listeners, today is not just about a country. It is about a mirror, a reflection of what is possible when limitations are ignored and discipline becomes a way of life. Because the truth is, most people don't stay poor because they lack money. They stay poor because they lack belief, patience, and the courage to endure invisible progress. I remember a young man, not very different from many of you listening right now. He used to sit late at night, staring at numbers that never seemed to grow, counting small savings, dreaming of something bigger, yet trapped in fear. Every time he thought about investing, a voice would whisper, "What if you lose it?" And so, he waited, and waited, and waited, until waiting became a habit, and fear became his comfort zone. You see, the biggest cost in life is not losing money, it is losing time. And this is where most people misunderstand wealth. They think wealth is built by big opportunities, big risks, big breakthroughs. But in reality, wealth is built quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. Now think about this for a moment. There was a time when Israel had very little natural resources. No rivers flowing with gold, no endless oil reserves, no easy advantages. Just people, determination, and an understanding that survival depends on growth. And that is where the lesson begins. Because when you don't have much, you are forced to think differently. You cannot afford laziness. You cannot afford distraction. You cannot afford excuses. But today, many people who have opportunities waste them, not because they are careless, but because they are comfortable. Comfort is the silent killer of wealth. I have seen people earning good salaries, yet living paycheck to paycheck, not because they don't earn enough, but because they never learned to control desire. They chase temporary pleasure instead of long-term freedom, and then there are those who start something, a small business, a small investment, a small step towards something bigger, but the moment they face loss, they stop. They say, maybe this isn't for me. But what if that failure was not the end? What if it was the tuition fee for a lesson that could change everything? You see, the journey of wealth is not clean. It is not smooth. It is not comfortable. It is filled with doubt, mistakes, sleepless nights, and moments where you question everything. There were times when even the most disciplined investors made decisions that didn't work. Times when the market went against them, when opportunities disappeared, when nothing made sense. But the difference, the real difference, was not intelligence, it was patience. Patience to hold on when nothing seems to be happening. Patience to trust the process when results are invisible. Patience to keep planting seeds, even when the ground looks dry. And this is exactly what most people lack today. They want fast money, quick success, instant results. They want to invest today and become rich tomorrow. But wealth does not work that way. Wealth respects time. It rewards those who are willing to wait, to learn, to adapt, to stay consistent, even when no one is watching. Now, let me ask you something. How many times have you stopped yourself from starting something just because you were afraid of losing money, afraid of failing, afraid of what others might say. That fear has cost more wealth in this world than any market crash ever could, because opportunity don't disappear. People simply don't take them. And this is where the story becomes deeper. Israel did not wait for perfect conditions. It did not say, "We will grow when everything is stable." It grew because things were unstable. And that is a powerful lesson, because life will never be perfect. There will always be uncertainty, risk, doubt, noise. But those who move forward anyway, those who build, invest, learn, and stay consistent, they are the ones who eventually create something extraordinary. I have seen people start with nothing, no connections, no big capital, no special advantages, just a simple decision to begin. They saved a little, invested a little, learned a little, and slowly, over time, those small actions became something much bigger. But here is the part that no one talks about. For a long time, it looks like nothing is happening. No big results, no dramatic changes, just slow, steady, almost boring progress. And this is where most people quit, because they mistake slow growth for no growth. They don't realize that beneath the surface, something powerful is being built, just like a tree. You don't see its roots growing, but that doesn't mean they are not there. And one day, when the time is right, everything changes, but only for those who had the patience to stay. So, my dear listeners, if you are struggling right now, if your savings feel small, if your progress feels slow, if your efforts feel invisible, do not lose heart, because wealth is not built in moments of excitement. It is built in moments of discipline. It is built when you choose to save instead of spend, when you choose to invest instead of delay, when you choose to learn instead of complain, and most importantly, when you choose to continue, even when it feels like nothing is working. Because one day, you will look back, and you will realize that those small, consistent steps were not small at all. They were everything. And yet, most people never reach that realization. Not because they are incapable, but because they walk away too soon. You see, there comes a phase in every meaningful journey where nothing seems to reward you. No applause, no visible growth, no validation, just silence. And in that silence, many begin to doubt themselves. They question their decisions, their direction, even their dreams. But what they fail to understand is, this silence is not emptiness. It is preparation. It is the quiet season, where discipline is tested, where character is shaped, where your relationship with time is defined, because anyone can stay motivated when things are working. But very few can stay committed when nothing is happening. And this is where true wealth begins to separate itself from temporary success. Think deeply for a moment. Why do some people build lasting financial empires, while others struggle their entire lives, and despite working just as hard? The answer is rarely effort. It is emotional discipline. The ability to remain calm when others panic, the ability to stay patient when others rush, the ability to think long-term when the world is obsessed with the short term. There were times when investors watched their portfolios shrink, when businesses faced losses, when uncertainty filled the air. And in those moments, fear became loud. It whispered, "Get out now, before it gets worse." It shouted, "You're losing everything." And many listened. They sold at the worst time. They walked away from opportunities. They abandoned their plans, not because they were wrong, but because they were afraid. And fear, when left unchecked, becomes the most expensive mistake you will ever make. Now imagine a different response. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of panicking, you observe. Instead of quitting, you stay. That simple shift from reaction to reflection changes everything. Because wealth is not just a financial journey, it is an emotional one. It tests your patience, your resilience, your ability to endure discomfort without losing direction. And here is something most people will never admit. The path to financial growth is often lonely. There will be times when people around you won't understand your decisions. They will question why you are saving when you could be enjoying, why you are investing when there is risk, why you are thinking years ahead, when they are focused on today. And in those moments, it is easy to feel isolated. But remember this: not everyone is meant to understand your journey, because not everyone is willing to make the same sacrifices. There is a quiet strength in choosing discipline over distraction, in choosing purpose over pleasure, in choosing long-term freedom over short-term comfort. And these choices, repeated over time, create something extraordinary. Just like a nation that chose innovation over limitation, focus over fear, and long-term vision over immediate ease, the same principle applies to your life. You may not see the results today. You may not feel the progress tomorrow. But if your direction is right, if your actions are consistent, if your mindset remains steady, then growth is not a possibility. It is a certainty. Now let us speak about something even deeper: delayed gratification. This is the invisible bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Most people understand it, but very few truly practice it, because it requires you to say no when everything around you says yes. No to unnecessary spending, no to impulsive decisions, no to distractions that steal your focus, and yes to patience, yes to discipline, yes to a future that you cannot yet see, but deeply believe in. There were individuals who chose to invest small amounts regularly, who resisted the urge to spend on things that didn't matter, who stayed consistent even when results were slow. And years later, their lives looked completely different, not because of luck, but because of choices, small, repeated, intentional choices. And here's the truth that many overlook: you don't need to do something extraordinary to build wealth. You need to do ordinary things extraordinarily well and consistently. Save regularly, invest wisely, avoid unnecessary risks, stay patient, keep learning. It sounds simple, but it is not easy, because the world constantly tries to pull you away from these principles. It offers shortcuts, promises quick success, creates urgency, feeds comparison, and if you are not careful, you begin to chase illusions instead of building reality. But those who stay grounded, those who understand that real wealth takes time, those who are willing to move slowly but steadily, they eventually reach a place where money is no longer a source of stress, but a tool of freedom. And that is the true goal: not just to earn more, but to live with peace, clarity, and control over your time. So, my dear listeners, if you feel like your journey is taking too long, if you feel like others are moving ahead faster, if you feel like your efforts are not being rewarded, pause and reflect. Are you building something real, or are you chasing something fast, because fast often fades, but real lasts? And in the end, it is not about how quickly you grow, but how deeply your foundation is built. And when the foundation is strong, something remarkable begins to happen. The noise of the world slowly fades, the pressure to compare disappears, and in its place, a quiet confidence begins to grow. Not loud, not arrogant, but calm, steady, unshakable. You no longer feel the need to prove anything, because you understand something that most people spend their entire lives chasing: that true wealth is not just what you have. It is how you think, how you feel, and how you live. Beloved listeners, there comes a time in every journey when you stop asking, "How fast can I grow?" and you begin asking, "How long can I sustain?" Because sustainability is the real power. Anyone can make money once, but very few can build a system, a mindset, a discipline that keeps it growing, peacefully, consistently, without chaos. And this is where clarity is born. You begin to see money, not as something to chase, but as something that flows, in response to value, patience, and wise decisions. You stop reacting to every market movement. You stop fearing every uncertainty. You stop doubting every step, because now you understand the rhythm: growth, pause, growth, pause, just like life itself. And instead of resisting it, you align with it. There is a certain peace in knowing that you don't need to rush, that you don't need to force outcomes, that you don't need to win every day. You simply need to stay consistent. And over time, that consistency compounds, not just in your finances, but in your character. You become more patient, more thoughtful, more intentional. And slowly, without even realizing it, you transform not into someone who has money, but into someone who understands it. And that understanding is far more valuable than any amount you could ever earn. Because money without understanding creates stress, but money with wisdom creates freedom. Now imagine a life where your decisions are no longer driven by fear, where your investments are guided by clarity, where your time is not controlled by urgency, but by purpose. That is not a dream. That is a direction, and it is available to anyone who is willing to walk this path with patience, discipline, and belief. Just like a small nation that refused to be defined by its limitations, you too have the ability to rise beyond your circumstances, not by rushing, not by chasing, but by building quietly, consistently, wisely. Because in the end, wealth is not about how much you accumulate. It is about how peacefully you can live with what you have built. It is about waking up without financial fear, making decisions without emotional pressure, living without constant worry about tomorrow. And that kind of wealth is not created overnight. It is created through years of silent effort, through choices that no one sees, through discipline that no one applauds. But one day, it all comes together, and when it does, you don't feel overwhelmed. You don't feel anxious. You feel at peace, a deep, grounded, unshakable peace, because you know you didn't get there by chance. You got there by becoming the kind of person who deserves to be there. So, my dear listeners, take a moment and breathe. Trust your journey. Respect your pace. Stay committed to your path, because everything you are building today, even if it feels small, even if it feels slow, is shaping a future that will one day feel effortless. And when that day comes, you will not just have wealth, you will have understanding, balance, and peace. Respected viewers, dear family of dreamers, if you have walked through these thoughts with patience, then you already feel it. Something within you has shifted, quietly, gently, but powerfully. Because this was never just a story about a nation. It was never just about money, or success, or growth. It was about you. It was about the realization that wealth is not reserved for a chosen few. It is built by those who choose themselves. Those who choose discipline when it is difficult. Those who choose patience when it is uncomfortable. Those who choose vision when the present feels uncertain. You see, the world will always show you extremes, fast success, sudden riches, overnight transformations. But what it rarely shows is the truth. That real wealth, the kind that lasts, the kind that brings peace, is built slowly, intentionally, and quietly, just like a seed, planted in silence, watered with consistency, protected with discipline, and over time, it becomes something strong, something stable, something unshakable, and the most beautiful part, anyone can plant that seed. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a perfect beginning. You don't need to wait for the right moment. You only need to begin. Begin with what you have. Begin where you are. Begin with belief, even if it feels small. Because belief, when combined with action, becomes momentum. And momentum, when sustained with patience, becomes transformation. So, do not underestimate your small steps. Do not doubt your slow progress. Do not compare your journey to others. Because the path to true wealth is not a race. It is a commitment to grow, to learn, to stay steady, even when life is not. And one day, without noise, without drama, without sudden miracles, you will look at your life, and you will realize you are no longer chasing wealth. You have become it, not just in numbers, but in mindset, in peace, in freedom, and that is the highest form of success. So move forward, calmly, wisely, patiently. Build not just for today, but for a future that reflects your values, your discipline, and your vision. Because abundance is not something you find, it is something you create. And it begins the moment you decide to never give up on yourself. No matter how slow the journey feels, stay steady, stay patient, and trust your time is coming.